My parents ignored my brother's cruel bullying my entire life. Now that I've finally escaped and found peace, they're begging me to come back, to save him. You know, I've built a good life for myself here in Seattle, a quiet kind of peace that honestly, I never thought I'd find. But that peace, it's a fragile thing, built on 2 decades of surviving my brother Marcus. He was cruel, truly, and my parents? They just watched, denying every single bruise, every tear, dismissing my pain like it was some childish game. I thought I'd finally escaped that nightmare forever, until my phone rang last Saturday. Their voices were trembling, practically begging me to come home. Marcus needed a kidney transplant, and they said I was his only hope. I grew up in this picture-perfect blue house with white trim in a quiet Portland suburb. From the outside, we looked like the ideal family. Marcus was 3 years older, and at first, I idolized him, you know, like little brothers do. I followed him everywhere, desperate to be like my cool, older brother who seemed to know everything. But that innocent admiration? It evaporated faster than a summer puddle. The first incident I really remember, I was 5. Marcus was 8, definitely old enough to know better. It was my birthday, and I'd gotten this limited edition Captain Stellar action figure, my absolute favorite superhero. I treasured that toy, kept it on a special shelf. One afternoon, I came home from kindergarten, and Captain Stellar was gone. Scattered across my bedroom floor were his arms and legs. His head, missing completely. I cried, really cried, to my parents. Marcus, though, he just put on his innocent face. He's always breaking his toys, he shrugged. It was probably like that when he left for school. My mom just patted my head. Nathaniel, you need to be more careful. It's just a toy, honey. No need for such dramatics. My dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Boys will be boys. You'll learn to toughen up. That night, I found Captain Stellar's head in Marcus's desk drawer. When I confronted him, he grabbed my arm, twisting it until I whimpered. Tell Mom and Dad, he whispered, his eyes cold. And next time, it'll be something worse than your stupid toy. That's when I learned. Marcus played by different rules. This wasn't typical brotherly roughhousing. This was calculated. There was a chilling satisfaction he took in my suffering. Even then, as a little kid, it terrified me. As we got older, his torment grew more sophisticated. He'd wait until no one was looking to trip me, pinch me, or destroy something I valued. In front of my parents, he was the perfect son, polite, charming, helpful. Behind closed doors, he was my personal nightmare. School should have been a refuge, but Marcus made sure it wasn't. He spread rumors, told other kids I wet the bed or had weird habits. Being Marcus's weird little brother became my unwanted identity. I tried to make friends, but he'd sabotage those relationships, either by intimidating other kids or embarrassing me in front of them. My 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Norris, noticed something was deeply wrong. She requested a parent-teacher conference, gently suggesting concerning dynamics between Marcus and me. My parents were indignant. Marcus is an exemplary student and brother, my mother insisted. Nathaniel has always been sensitive and prone to exaggeration. We're working on that with him. Mrs. Norris tried to press, but my parents complained to the principal, and that was that. After that, I learned even adults couldn't help me. I became quieter, swallowed my pain, and tried to disappear. Our family dynamics were crystal clear. Marcus was the golden child, athletic, charismatic, academically successful. I was the disappointment, too quiet, too sensitive, too everything my parents didn't value. They'd be at every one of Marcus's baseball games, cheering loudly, while my art show or science fair would get a cursory, "That's nice, honey," if they even bothered to show up. When I was 10, I finally gathered the courage to stand up. Marcus had taken my homework, replaced it with gibberish, and I'd gotten detention. That evening, at the dinner table, my voice shaking, I blurted it out. Marcus stole my homework. That's why I got detention. The table went silent. My father's face darkened. My mother looked embarrassed. Nathaniel, she scolded. What a terrible accusation to make against your brother. Marcus put on this wounded expression. Why would I even do that? I was studying with Jason all afternoon yesterday. You can call his mom if you don't believe me. My father slammed his hand on the table. I won't have this kind of jealousy in my house. Go to your room, Nathaniel. No dinner tonight, and you'll apologize to your brother in the morning. As I left the table, I caught Marcus's smirk. Later that night, he came to my room. Next time, he whispered, Remember who they'll always believe. I remembered, and I never publicly accused him again. Middle school brought new dimensions to Marcus's bullying. Now 14 and 16, he developed a social savvy that made him popular and powerful. Meanwhile, I shuffled through the halls, head down, trying to be invisible. The physical bullying became more calculated. He knew exactly how hard to hit to avoid leaving marks, where to shove me so I'd fall, but couldn't prove it was deliberate. He'd wait until our parents were out of earshot to whisper threats. His timing was impeccable. "Nobody actually likes you," he'd tell me casually, passing the salt at dinner. "They just feel sorry for you." Or he'd brush past me in the hallway. "I read your journal." Pathetic. I'd never kept a journal, but I spent hours tearing my room apart, paranoid about what private thoughts he might have discovered. This psychological warfare extended to school. He'd tell his friends about embarrassing things I'd allegedly done, fictional bedwetting incidents, bizarre habits. He'd hack into my email and send strange messages to classmates. People started avoiding me, whispering as I passed. One particular incident stands out from 8th grade. I'd spent weeks on a science fair project, building a small working wind turbine. The night before the fair, I left it in the garage. In the morning, it was destroyed. Wires cut, blades snapped, the base cracked. My mother found me crying over the pieces. "Oh, Nathaniel," she sighed. "You should have been more careful. The garage is no place for delicate things." When I suggested Marcus might have done it, my father's patience snapped. "This blame game has got to stop." Marcus was at basketball practice until 9, then went straight to bed. I checked on him myself. "You need to take responsibility for your own carelessness." What they didn't know was Marcus had mastered sneaking out after they went to bed. I'd heard him many times, but saying so would only get me in more trouble. As high school began, the contrast between our lives grew starker. Marcus was student body president, star athlete, dating the prettiest girls. I was the awkward younger brother with few friends, known for being too sensitive or odd. My anxiety and depression deepened. I developed insomnia, jumping at small noises, always anticipating the next attack. My grades suffered. When my parents received notices about my declining performance, they reacted with disappointment, not concern. "Your brother manages to get straight A's while juggling sports and student government," my father would say. "What's your excuse?" I found small sanctuaries: the school library during lunch, the computer lab after hours, my bedroom with the door locked. I taught myself programming, finding comfort in the logical world of code, where rules made sense and actions had predictable consequences. Unlike my home life, where the rules constantly shifted to ensure I always lost. In sophomore year, I met Trevor Matthews in computer club. He was new to the school, hadn't yet absorbed the general opinion that I was someone to avoid. When Marcus tried his usual tactics, spreading rumors about me to Trevor, something unexpected happened. "Your brother's kind of a jerk, isn't he?" Trevor said one day as we worked on a coding project. I froze, unable to respond. No one had ever acknowledged it before. "My cousin was like that," Trevor continued casually. "Total psycho to me, perfect angel to everyone else." Gaslighting is what my aunt called it once she finally figured it out. That was the first time I'd heard the term. That night, I looked it up. Reading about psychological manipulation, I felt this horrifying recognition. Someone else had experienced this. There was a name for it. I wasn't crazy. Trevor became my one true friend, the only person who believed me without question. With his support, I began to imagine a future beyond my family's house of mirrors. But Marcus noticed this new friendship, this small pocket of happiness. During my junior year, he executed his most devastating attack yet. He threw a party when our parents were out of town, something they'd forbidden, but would ultimately forgive their golden boy for. During the party, several students' wallets and phones went missing. 2 days later, the stolen items were found in my locker, along with a small bag of marijuana. The principal called my parents. Marcus played the shocked, disappointed brother. "I just don't understand," he said, shaking his head sadly. "He's been acting weird lately, hanging out with that new kid. Maybe he's a bad influence." I protested my innocence, but the evidence seemed irrefutable. Only Trevor stood by me, pointing out I'd been at his house studying during the party, that I had no access to the stolen items. But his word against the evidence wasn't enough. I narrowly avoided expulsion, instead serving weeks of detention and falling under intense scrutiny from both school authorities and my increasingly concerned parents. What they called concern, I recognized as surveillance. They began checking my room, monitoring my computer usage, questioning my whereabouts, all while Marcus watched with satisfaction, knowing he'd succeeded in making me a prisoner in my own home. By 17, I barely recognized myself. The outgoing child who once loved school had become a withdrawn teenager who flinched at sudden movements and avoided eye contact. My world had shrunk to navigating the daily minefield of home and school without triggering Marcus's cruelty or my parents' disappointment. Marcus, now 20, had chosen to attend the local community college while living at home. I'd hoped he'd move away for school, giving me some peace in my final high school years, but no such luck. His presence remained a constant threat. My parents had started a college fund for me when I was born. Nothing extravagant, but enough to cover part of tuition at a state school. It represented my only hope for escape, the light at the end of my tunnel. I'd begun researching colleges across the country, dreaming of places thousands of miles from Portland, from Marcus, from the toxic environment that was crushing me. One evening in spring of my junior year, I overheard my parents discussing finances in hushed tones. Curious, I lingered in the hallway, out of sight. "The account is completely empty," my father was saying. "How could this happen? Could it be a bank error?" my mother suggested. "I've already called them. The withdrawals were made over several months, all with the correct PIN and ID verification." My blood ran cold. They were talking about my college fund. The next morning, the storm broke. My parents confronted me at breakfast, faces grim. "We need to talk about the money, Nathaniel," my father said. "What money?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Don't play dumb. Your college fund. $17,000 withdrawn over the past 6 months. I stared at them, uncomprehending. "I didn't take any money. I don't even have access to that account." My mother pushed a stack of papers toward me. "Then explain these withdrawals, all made during school hours when you're supposed to be in class. And these." She slid over several absence notices from school, showing you've been skipping classes on exactly those days. I felt the room tilting. "I didn't skip those classes. I was there. You can ask my teachers." "We already did," my father interrupted. "They confirmed your absences." Marcus entered the kitchen, concern etched on his face. "What's going on?" My father explained the situation while I sat in stunned silence. Marcus's expression shifted from concern to disappointment. "I didn't want to say anything," he said hesitantly, "but I've noticed some changes in Nathaniel lately. New clothes he couldn't explain. Staying out late with people I don't know." "That's a lie," I shouted. "I haven't bought new clothes in a year, and I'm never out late. You've got me on lockdown since the locker incident." "And there's this," Marcus continued, pulling a small baggie of pills from his pocket. "I found it in his desk drawer when I was looking for a calculator." My parents stared at the pills, then at me, horror and disappointment mingling in their expressions. "They're not mine," I said, my voice breaking. "He's planting evidence, just like with the stolen wallets. Don't you see what he's doing?" But they didn't see. They couldn't, or wouldn't, recognize the pattern that had defined my entire childhood. My father confiscated my laptop and phone. My mother cried about where they'd gone wrong. I was grounded indefinitely, with talks of counseling for my substance abuse and criminal behavior. Later, alone in my room, I pieced together what must have happened. The absences were falsified, probably through Marcus's connections in the school office. The withdrawals were made using my ID, which had gone mysteriously missing for a week earlier that year before reappearing in my gym locker. Marcus had planned this meticulously, ensuring I'd have no escape route. That night, I contemplated ending it all. The future stretched before me, bleak and hopeless. No college fund meant no escape. My parents believed I was a thief and an addict. My life at home was unbearable. What was the point of continuing? I texted Trevor using an old iPod my parents had forgotten about, connecting to the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi. He came to my window at midnight, and we talked until dawn. He reminded me I only needed to endure one more year before legally being able to leave. He helped me see there were options beyond my parents' financial support. "Apply for scholarships," he urged. "You're smart enough. And student loans exist for a reason." With Trevor's support, I developed a new escape plan. I began applying for every scholarship I could find, writing essays late at night after my parents were asleep. I took on a part-time job at a local bookstore, saving every penny in a bank account Trevor's mom helped me open, using her address for the statements. By some miracle, or perhaps because my desperation, translated into particularly compelling essays, I received a substantial scholarship to a university in Boston. It wouldn't cover everything, but combined with student loans and my secret savings, it made escape possible. When the acceptance and scholarship letter arrived, my parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. Boston is very expensive, my mother fretted, and so far away. The state university would be much more practical now that your college fund is gone. And how do we know you won't waste this opportunity, too? My father added. Marcus, however, recognized the threat of my imminent escape. In the weeks leading up to my departure, things I needed for college began disappearing. My laptop charger, important documents, the winter clothes I'd need in Boston. My acceptance letter itself vanished, forcing me to request a replacement copy sent directly to Trevor's house. The morning I left for Boston, my parents gave me stiff, awkward hugs. My mother handed me a small envelope with $200 for emergencies, while reminding me how disappointed they were in my past behavior. My father limited his advice to a stern warning about staying away from those types of people who'd led me astray before. Marcus didn't even come downstairs to say goodbye. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at my childhood home and saw him watching from his bedroom window, his expression unreadable. I didn't know it then, but it would be 5 years before I voluntarily spoke to any of them again. Arriving in Boston felt like landing on another planet. For the first time in my life, no one knew me as Marcus's weird brother or the Wilson boy with problems. I could be anyone. Or, more importantly, I could be myself, whoever that was. I'd spent so long adapting to survive that I barely knew my own preferences, interests, or personality outside the context of avoiding Marcus's wrath. The transition wasn't smooth. During orientation week, my roommate accidentally slammed a door, and I had a full-blown panic attack. Hyperventilating, shaking, convinced I was about to be punished for something. The episode was embarrassing enough that I finally visited the university's counseling center, expecting to be dismissed or misunderstood as I had been my entire life. Instead, I met Dr. Evelyn Carter, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma. In our first session, I revealed only the barest outline of my childhood, testing the waters cautiously. To my shock, she didn't minimize my experiences or suggest I was exaggerating. What you're describing sounds like a classic case of scapegoating within a family system, complicated by sibling abuse, she said matter-of-factly. Your responses, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, the difficulty trusting, these are normal adaptations to an abnormal situation. I broke down in her office that day, sobbing with the simple relief of being believed. Over the next 3 years, Dr. Carter helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my childhood. I learned about narcissistic family systems, about trauma responses, about how the brain adapts to chronic stress and fear. Most importantly, I learned that none of it had been my fault. My contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls, brief and superficial. I'd answer their questions about classes with minimal detail, deflect their complaints about how seldom I called, and end the conversation as quickly as possible. Marcus occasionally tried to bait me during these calls, making subtle digs designed to provoke a reaction, but I'd learned to disengage. Sounds like college has made you even more sensitive, he commented during one Christmas call. Can't even take a joke anymore. I simply responded, I need to go study now. Goodbye, and hung up. My heart raced, but my voice was steady. Each semester, each year that passed, I grew stronger. I discovered I had a talent for computer science, particularly software engineering. I made friends slowly, cautiously at first, always expecting betrayal, but gradually learning to open up. I joined clubs, tried new activities, discovered I enjoyed rock climbing and photography. After graduation, I received multiple job offers. I chose a tech firm in Seattle, partly for the career opportunity and partly for the additional 3,000 miles it would put between me and Portland. The company offered relocation assistance, and within a month of finishing my degree, I was settled in a small but modern apartment in a city where it rained almost as much as my childhood home, but where the air somehow felt clearer. My career flourished. I moved from entry-level programming to senior developer within 3 years, earned a reputation for solving complex problems, and working well with clients. For the first time, I received recognition for my abilities rather than comparison to a golden child sibling. It was at a company event that I met Stephanie Ross, a UX designer with a laugh that made me want to hear it again, and a directness that was both terrifying and refreshing. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, until we realized we were the last people at the restaurant and the staff was politely waiting for us to leave. Dating Stephanie was an education in normal relationship dynamics. She expressed her needs clearly instead of through manipulation. She didn't punish me for small mistakes or use my vulnerabilities against me. When we disagreed, we talked through the issue rather than her keeping score for later retaliation. These basic aspects of healthy interaction were revelations to me. "You apologize a lot for things that aren't your fault," she observed one night, several months into our relationship. Force of habit, I admitted. It was safer to assume everything was my fault. Instead of dismissing this as dramatic, she took my hand. That must have been exhausting. That simple validation, something my family had never offered, brought tears to my eyes. As our relationship deepened, I gradually shared more about my childhood. Stephanie listened without judgment, expressing appropriate anger on my behalf rather than suggesting I get over it or move on. When I worried I might have inherited toxic traits from my family, she helped me examine my behaviors objectively, reassuring me when my concerns were unfounded and gently helping me correct patterns that weren't healthy. "You're not your brother," she told me once, "and you're not doomed to repeat your parents' mistakes. You're conscious of these patterns, which means you can choose different ones." With Stephanie's support and continued therapy, I built the life I'd always dreamed of. Meaningful work, genuine friendships, a loving relationship, and most precious of all, peace. The hypervigilance that had been my constant companion for 20 years gradually subsided. I slept through the night more often than not. I laughed easily and meant it. The evening I proposed to Stephanie, standing on a ferry with the Seattle skyline glittering behind us, I felt a sense of wonder that this life, this good, kind, ordinary life, was actually mine. When she said yes, I believed, perhaps for the first time, that I deserved happiness. We set a date for the following spring. I sent my parents a formal invitation out of obligation rather than desire for their presence. They responded with a terse acceptance and a request to bring Marcus and his new wife, Veronica. I agreed, assuming I could endure their company for one day, given how much stronger I'd become. I truly believed I'd escaped the gravitational pull of my toxic family. I'd built an impenetrable fortress of distance, boundaries, and new relationships. I was safe. I was free. And then my phone rang on a peaceful Saturday morning in October, and my mother's voice, tight with panic and thick with tears, pulled me back into orbit. Stephanie and I were enjoying a lazy weekend morning. Rain pattered against the windows of our Seattle apartment, and the scent of coffee filled the kitchen. We'd been discussing honeymoon destinations, debating between the vineyards of Tuscany and the beaches of Bali. It was the kind of ordinary, happy moment that still sometimes caught me by surprise. This normal life I'd built so far from the chaos of my childhood. When my phone rang, showing my parents' number, my first instinct was to ignore it. They rarely called outside our scheduled monthly check-ins, and those calls were brief and superficial by design. But something, intuition, or perhaps lingering conditioning, made me answer. "Nathaniel." My mother's voice sounded strange, strained. "Thank God you picked up. What's wrong?" I asked, immediately alert. "It's Marcus." She was crying now. "He's in the hospital. There was an accident." The details emerged in a disjointed rush. Marcus had been driving home from a party, intoxicated, and had crashed his car into a guardrail. He'd survived, but suffered severe internal injuries. His kidneys were damaged beyond repair. He needed a transplant. "The doctors tested your father and me," my mother explained. "But neither of us is compatible. You're his only hope, Nathaniel." Those words, "You're his only hope," sent ice through my veins. After years of therapy, I recognized the manipulation, the pressure, the implicit guilt trip. But recognition didn't make me immune to its effects. "We need you to come home," my father's voice now, having taken the phone from my mother. "Get tested to see if you're a match. He's your brother, Nathaniel." That final appeal, "He's your brother," was laden with unspoken accusations. The subtext was clear. Whatever grievances you think you have, however much you've distanced yourself, blood is blood. You owe him this. After promising to think about it and ending the call, I sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold my coffee mug. Memories flooded back. Marcus destroying my things, framing me for theft, stealing my college fund, the years of gaslighting and torment. And underneath it all, my parents' persistent blindness, their unwavering defense of him at my expense. You don't owe them anything, Stephanie said quietly, watching my face. Not a visit, not a test, certainly not a kidney. I nodded, but the programmed guilt was already working its way through my system. My breathing became shallow, my chest tight. The panic attack built gradually at first, then crashed over me like a wave. Stephanie guided me through the grounding techniques Dr. Carter had taught me. 5 things I could see. 4 I could touch. 3 I could hear. 2 I could smell. 1 I could taste, the coffee bitter on my tongue. The rain against the window. The soft fabric of the couch beneath my fingers. When the worst had passed, I called Trevor, who remained my closest friend despite the distance. He'd heard the family dynamics firsthand, had witnessed the aftermath of Marcus's cruelty throughout high school. They haven't changed, Nate, he said after I explained the situation. They're using the same playbook they always have. Marcus in crisis, you expected to sacrifice. The only difference is the stakes are higher. But what if he dies because I refused? The question that had been circling my mind finally escaped. Trevor's response was measured. What if he does? Would that be your fault, or the result of his own choices and actions over many years? He chose to drive drunk. He chose to treat you cruelly your entire life. Your parents chose to enable his behavior and dismiss your pain. Are you responsible for the natural consequences of their choices? I didn't have an answer, but the question itself helped create space around the suffocating sense of obligation I felt. Next, I called Dr. Carter, who had continued as my therapist via video sessions after I moved to Seattle. She listened to the situation without interruption, then offered her professional perspective. This is a profound boundary challenge, she said. After years of building healthy separation from your family's dysfunction, you're being asked to literally give a piece of your body to the person who caused you the most harm. There's no simple answer here, Nathaniel, but whatever you decide, it needs to come from your authentic self, not from guilt or obligation or fear. How do I know what my authentic self wants? I asked. By taking time to listen to it, she advised. By not rushing into a decision from panic. By consulting your values rather than your conditioning. After our session, I sat alone on our small balcony, watching the Seattle skyline disappear into the evening fog. The decision before me wasn't just about a medical procedure. It was about whether I would allow myself to be pulled back into a system that had nearly destroyed me, whether the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish would crumble under the weight of crisis. That night, I told Stephanie I needed to call my parents back and establish terms for my involvement. Whatever you decide, she said, I'm with you. But promise me you won't let them erase everything you've built here. I promised. Then I dialed the number that still, after all these years, made my pulse quicken with anxiety. I'll come to Portland, I told my mother, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'll get tested, but I need to be clear about something. This doesn't reset our relationship. This doesn't erase the past. If I'm a match, and if I decide to donate, it will be under conditions that I'll explain when I arrive. There was silence on the other end, then my father's voice, gruff with what might have been relief or resentment. Just get here, Nathaniel. We can sort out the rest later. But I knew better than to leave things ambiguous with them. Ambiguity had always been weaponized against me. No, I said firmly. We begin as we mean to continue. My boundaries are non-negotiable. If you can't accept that, then I won't come at all. Another silence, longer this time. Then my mother, subdued. We understand. Just please come soon. He doesn't have much time. As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. I was returning to the scene of my childhood trauma, but I was no longer the defenseless child they remembered. I was a man with resources, with support, with hard-won awareness of the dynamics that had shaped me. I was walking back into the lion's den, but this time, I wasn't unarmed. The flight to Portland was turbulent, matching my internal state. Stephanie had offered to come with me, but I'd asked her to wait. I needed to face my family alone first, to test my strength against their pull before exposing her to their dysfunction. As the plane descended through rain clouds, I watched the familiar landscape emerge, the winding river, the green hills, the downtown skyline. My stomach clenched with anxiety, a muscle memory from years of walking on eggshells. I took deep breaths, reminding myself, I had options now. I could leave anytime. I had a return ticket, a job, a home, a fiancé who knew my worth, even when I forgot it. Myself. My parents were waiting at the arrival gate, looking older than I remembered. My mother had new lines around her eyes, and my father's hair had gone completely gray. They approached me with awkward, tentative movements, as if unsure of the protocol for greeting a son they'd effectively lost years ago. My mother reached for a hug, which I allowed but didn't fully return. My father shook my hand formally, then patted my shoulder in a stilted gesture of affection. "You look well," my mother said, her eyes moving over me assessingly. "Seattle must agree with you." "It does," I replied simply. The drive to the hospital was filled with their careful small talk. Comments about the weather, questions about my flight, observations about changes to the city since I'd left. They pointedly avoided any mention of Marcus's condition or the reason for my visit, as if we were on an ordinary family outing rather than a medical emergency. This superficiality was their specialty, skating over the surface of things, never acknowledging the churning depths below. In the past, I'd participated in this charade, desperate for any semblance of normalcy. Now, I recognized it as another form of denial, and I refused to play along. "Tell me more about Marcus's condition," I said, interrupting my mother's monologue about a new shopping center. "What exactly happened? What's the prognosis?" My parents exchanged glances in the front seat. My father cleared his throat. "He was coming home from a work event," he began. "Mom said it was a party," I corrected. Another glance between them. "Yes, well, a work party. His company had a celebration for making quarterly targets. Marcus had a few drinks, then tried to drive home. He crashed into a guardrail on the Morrison Bridge. He was lucky to survive," my mother added. "The car was totaled. His kidneys were severely damaged from the impact. The doctors tried dialysis, but there were complications. They've made it clear that a transplant is the only viable long-term solution." The hospital was largely as I remembered it from a childhood tonsillectomy. The same antiseptic smell, the same fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. We took the elevator to the 5th floor where a sign indicated nephrology/transplant unit. Marcus's room was private, with monitors beeping steadily and 4 lines running into his arm. He looked diminished somehow, his usual commanding presence reduced by hospital gown and medical apparatus. His wife, Veronica, sat beside the bed, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when we entered, her expression shifting from boredom to curiosity when she saw me. "You must be Nathaniel," she said, standing to offer her hand. "I've heard so much about you." I wondered exactly what she'd heard and from whom. Had Marcus painted me as the troubled younger brother, the family disappointment, or had he told the truth about our childhood, admitting his role in my exile? Marcus stirred at the sound of voices, his eyes opening slowly. When they focused on me, a complex series of emotions crossed his face: surprise, relief, and something that might have been shame before it was quickly suppressed. "You came," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm here to get tested," I clarified. "That's all I've agreed to for now." My parents made nervous, fluttering movements, my mother straightening Marcus's blankets, my father checking his watch and mentioning something about finding the doctor. When they left the room, ostensibly to speak with the medical team, an uncomfortable silence fell. Veronica looked between Marcus and me, then sighed. "I'll get some coffee," she said, but paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Nathaniel, he's not the same person you grew up with." After she left, I stood at the foot of Marcus's bed, maintaining distance, both physical and emotional. "Veronica seems nice," I said neutrally. Marcus nodded. "We met 3 years ago, got married last spring. I received the invitation. I didn't mention that I'd thrown it away without responding. I didn't expect you to come." He looked at his hands wherein 4 needle was taped. "To the wedding? Or now?" Before I could respond, Veronica returned, but not with coffee. Her expression was strained. "Can I speak with you outside?" she asked me. In the hallway, she paced a few steps, then stopped, facing me directly. "I should be honest with you," she said. "Marcus isn't as changed as everyone pretends. Your parents paint this picture of him as the perfect son who made one mistake driving home. The reality is," she hesitated, "he's been drinking heavily for years. I've threatened divorce twice over it. This accident wasn't some isolated incident. It was the inevitable conclusion to a pattern. I studied her, trying to determine her motivation for sharing this. Why tell me this now? I asked. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Because I'm tired of the lies. Because you're considering giving up a kidney for him, and you should know what you're really saving. And because... She looked away. Because he's done to me some of what I suspect he did to you growing up. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the cruel comments disguised as jokes. We don't have children yet, thank God, but I've seen how he is with my sister's kids. It scares me. Her words hit me like physical blows. I'd assumed, hoped, that Marcus's cruelty had been confined to me, that it was a bizarre dynamic specific to our sibling relationship. Learning that he'd continued the pattern with Veronica confirmed my worst fears. He wasn't going to change. Ever. Before I could process this fully, a doctor approached, Dr. Alexander Hayes, according to his ID badge. He introduced himself and suggested we move to a consultation room to discuss the testing procedure. Once we were seated, with my parents joining us, Dr. Hayes explained the process for determining compatibility and what donation would entail if I matched, the surgery, recovery time, potential risks, long-term considerations. He was clinical and thorough, treating it as a medical decision rather than the emotional minefield it actually was. "Do you have any questions?" he asked when he'd finished. "Yes," I said. "What caused Marcus's kidneys to fail so catastrophically? Was it just the accident, or were there underlying factors?" Dr. Hayes glanced at my parents, who tensed visibly. Patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing details without Marcus's consent. I can say generally that trauma from the accident was the immediate cause, but pre-existing conditions can certainly complicate recovery. I understood what he wasn't saying. The years of heavy drinking Veronica had mentioned had already damaged Marcus's organs. The accident had merely delivered the final blow to an already compromised system. After the consultation, my parents suggested we get lunch in the hospital cafeteria. As we sat with unappetizing sandwiches and weak coffee, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "I need to be clear about something," I began. "I'm not here because I've forgotten or forgiven what happened when we lived under the same roof. I'm here because, despite everything, I don't want Marcus to die if I can prevent it. But I won't pretend we're a normal family reuniting in a crisis." My mother's face crumpled. "Nathaniel, that was all so long ago. You were children. Siblings fight." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm but quiet. "What happened between Marcus and me wasn't normal sibling rivalry. It was systematic. Abuse, and you both enabled it." My father's face darkened with the familiar expression that had once terrified me. "That's a very serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a statement of fact. Marcus tormented me physically and psychologically for years. He destroyed my things, sabotaged my relationships, framed me for things I didn't do. And you too." I looked between them. "You either didn't see it or chose not to. You always were sensitive," my mother said, her default dismissal. "You took everything so personally. How should I have taken it when Marcus destroyed my science project or when he stole my college fund and framed me for it? Was that just my sensitivity?" My father leaned forward. "We don't know for certain that Marcus took that money." "Stop." My voice was quiet, but so sharp that both of them fell silent. "This is exactly the dynamic I'm talking about. Marcus does something cruel or destructive, I pointed out, and you deny, minimize, or blame me. It's been the pattern my entire life, and I see it hasn't changed at all." My mother began to cry softly. My father put his arm around her, glaring at me as if I were the villain in this scene. "We didn't come here to dredge up ancient history," he said. "We're here because your brother needs you. And I need something too," I replied. "I need acknowledgement of what really happened in our family. I need accountability. Without that, there's no path forward for us, kidney or no kidney." I stood up, suddenly unable to remain at that table a moment longer. "I'll complete the testing as promised, but my decision about donation will depend on whether you're willing to face the truth about our family. All of it." I walked away, their protests fading behind me. I found a quiet corner in the hospital lobby, my heart racing, but my mind surprisingly clear. It was the first time I'd confronted them so directly about the past. And though their reaction was predictable, my own calm resolve was new. After composing myself, I returned to Marcus's room, finding him alone. Veronica had gone home to rest, and my parents were presumably still in the cafeteria, recovering from our confrontation. They told me you'd be getting tested tomorrow morning, Marcus said as I entered. I nodded, taking the chair near his bed, but not too near. Why, he asked. After everything, why would you even consider this? It was the first honest question he'd asked me in perhaps our entire lives. I'm still figuring that out, I answered truthfully. Marcus was silent for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't sure you'd come. I told them not to call you. This surprised me. Why? He shifted uncomfortably. Because I knew what they'd do. The guilt trip, the emotional manipulation, the same they always pulled on you, making you the one responsible for fixing everything. It was such an accurate assessment of our family dynamic that I was momentarily speechless. And, he continued, not meeting my eyes, because I know I don't deserve your help. For a moment, I glimpsed something I had never seen in my brother before, a flicker of genuine self-awareness. But just as quickly, it was replaced by the more familiar Marcus. But they insisted, he said, a hint of the old entitlement creeping back into his voice. Said you were the only option left. And family is family, right? Despite our differences. Differences? I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call what you did to me for 18 years? Differences. His jaw tightened. I was a kid too, Nathaniel. Kids do stupid things. Kids tease each other. They get into fights. They don't engage in systematic psychological torture. They don't frame their siblings for theft or destroy their college opportunities. Always so dramatic, he muttered. And in that moment, he sounded exactly like our mother. Look, if you're going to help, help. If not, just go back to Seattle. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stood up, a wave of clarity washing over me. Nothing had changed. Not Marcus, not my parents, not the fundamental dysfunction that had driven me across the country twice over. I'll be at the testing center at 8 tomorrow, I said. After that, I'll decide what happens next. I left the room without looking back, my decision already crystallizing, though I wouldn't voice it until I'd had time to reflect fully. In the hospital corridor, I pulled out my phone and booked a hotel room. There was no way I could stay in my parents' house, surrounded by the echoes of old pain and fresh denial. As I walked toward the exit, I felt a strange lightness. I'd faced them all, Marcus, my mother, my father, and I'd stood my ground. Their power to diminish me, to make me doubt my own reality, had finally, irrevocably broken. In my hotel room that evening, I stood at the window watching Portland's familiar rain streak against the glass. The city felt both intimately known and completely foreign, like a recurring dream suddenly experienced while awake. I called Stephanie first, describing the confrontations with my family, Veronica's revelations about Marcus, and the hollow feeling that had settled in my chest. I don't know what I expected, I admitted. Part of me hoped that a crisis this serious might have changed them, made them more reflective, more honest. But they're exactly the same. People rarely change unless they want to, Stephanie said gently. And wanting to change requires acknowledging there's something wrong in the first place. Her voice, steady and rational, anchored me. This was the difference between my past and present. Having someone who stood firmly in my corner, who saw me clearly and valued me consistently. Next, I called Dr. Carter, who had agreed to be available during this trip, given its psychological significance. I feel like I'm being manipulated into a no-win situation, I told her. If I donate, I'm sacrificing my physical health for someone who abused me and shows minimal remorse. If I don't, I'm the villain who let his brother die out of spite. Those aren't your only options, Dr. Carter pointed out. There's a middle path here. You can set conditions that protect your well-being while still helping if that's what you ultimately want to do. What kind of conditions? That depends on what you need to feel secure in this interaction. What would make this situation feel less like a sacrifice and more like a choice? I pondered this question throughout the night, making lists, crossing things out, refining my thoughts. By morning, I had clarity. The testing process was straightforward: blood draws, tissue typing, a comprehensive health assessment. The medical team was professional and non-judgmental, treating my potential donation as my choice rather than a foregone conclusion. After completing the tests, I requested a private meeting with my parents. We gathered in the same consultation room from the day before, the neutral territory of the hospital providing some emotional buffer. I want to be very clear about where we stand, I began. The test results will take a few days. If I'm a match, and if I decide to donate, it will be under specific conditions. My mother started to protest, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. What conditions? He asked. I took a deep breath. First, acknowledgement. I need you both to recognize that what happened in our family wasn't normal sibling rivalry. Marcus abused me systematically and deliberately, and you enabled it through denial and inaction. My mother's face hardened. Nathaniel, this isn't the time for, it's exactly the time, I interrupted. For years, I've carried this burden alone. I've worked through it in therapy, rebuilt my life despite it, but you've never had to face it. That ends now. I continued, my voice steady. Second, action. You both need professional help to understand your role and what happened. I want a commitment to family therapy with a specialist in dysfunctional family systems. Not just 1 or 2 sessions to appease me, but a genuine, ongoing commitment. My father's expression was unreadable. And third, boundaries. If I do this, it doesn't reset our relationship to some fantasy version where everything is forgiven and forgotten. It doesn't give any of you the right to make demands or expectations of me beyond this specific situation. My life in Seattle, my relationship with Stephanie, my limited contact with this family, all of that remains my choice. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken truths. My mother wiped tears from her cheeks, but her eyes held more anger than sadness. You're blackmailing us when your brother's life is at stake, she said. No, I replied calmly. I'm establishing the conditions under which I'm willing to help. You're free to refuse them. There are dialysis options, transplant lists, other medical avenues. I'm not Marcus's only hope. I'm just his most convenient one. My father, always the pragmatist, asked, and if we agree to these terms? Then if I'm a match, I'll donate. But the agreement comes first, not after. I left them to discuss it, knowing they would likely view my conditions as unreasonable or vindictive rather than the necessary protections they were. I returned to my hotel, packed my small suitcase, and prepared for either outcome. Whatever they decided, I would leave Portland tomorrow, returning only if necessary for the surgery. That evening, my phone rang. It was my father. We've discussed your requirements, he said, the word clearly distasteful to him. Your mother and I are willing to try this therapy you're suggesting. Not because we agree with your characterization of the past, but because if that's what it takes to save Marcus, we'll do it. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I'd hoped for, but it was movement, however slight, and the other conditions. I pressed. Yes, we understand the boundaries. This doesn't change everything overnight. Then, if I'm a match, I'll do it. 3 days later, the call came. I was compatible. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, giving me time to return to Seattle briefly, to hold Stephanie, to center myself before the procedure. The day of the surgery, Stephanie flew down to be with me. My parents were awkward around her, unsure how to interact with this person who knew the unvarnished truth about them. The procedure itself was successful. My kidney was removed laparoscopic and transplanted into Marcus. The doctors were optimistic about his prognosis, assuming he made significant lifestyle changes, primarily never drinking alcohol again. During my recovery, Stephanie stayed by my side, fiercely protective, running interference with my family to ensure my boundaries remained intact. Marcus sent a handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you. I don't deserve it." It was perhaps the most honest communication we'd ever had. My parents did attend therapy, though I learned from their therapist, with my permission, that they struggled with accepting their role in the family dysfunction. My mother particularly resisted the idea that she had failed to protect me, finding it easier to believe I had been oversensitive than that she had been neglectful. 6 months later, back in Seattle and fully recovered, I received an email from Marcus. He was sober, he wrote, attending both individual therapy and Alcoholics Anonymous. Veronica had agreed to try counseling with him. He didn't ask for forgiveness or a relationship, just shared the information as a matter of record. I didn't respond immediately. When I did, weeks later, my message was brief. I'm glad you're getting help. Take care of my kidney. My parents continued to call monthly. Our conversations were still awkward, but with moments of greater authenticity than before. My mother occasionally referenced something from her therapy sessions, indicating she was at least engaging with the process. My father once, to my shock, said, "I think we missed a lot of what was happening between you boys. I'm trying to understand why." It wasn't a full reckoning, but it was a start. Stephanie and I proceeded with our wedding plans, a small ceremony on the Washington coast. I invited my family with clear expectations about their role and behavior. They attended, subdued and careful, clearly trying to navigate the new dynamics between us. During the reception, Marcus approached me, keeping a respectful distance. "Congratulations," he said. "Stephanie seems good for you." "She is," I agreed. "Listen, I know we can't go back. I know too much happened, but I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. It's not enough, but it's true." It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever received from him. I nodded, unable to offer forgiveness yet, but acknowledging the effort. "Take care of yourself, Marcus," I said. "And like I said before, take care of my kidney." He almost smiled at that, then walked away, respecting the boundaries I'd established. Back in our Seattle home, now shared with Stephanie as my wife, I felt the final pieces of my healing journey click into place. I had faced my abuser and those who enabled him. I had set boundaries and enforced them. I had extended help without sacrificing my self-worth or safety. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't just about blood or shared history. It's about respect, honesty, and mutual care. Stephanie was my family now. Trevor was family. The friends who supported me through this journey were family. And my blood relatives? They existed in a carefully managed space at the periphery of my life, their access to me contingent on their continued efforts toward change. I don't know if they'll ever fully understand or acknowledge the damage they caused, but I've realized that my healing isn't dependent on their recognition. My peace is mine to build and protect, regardless of their journey.